Today our subject is the path of Kriya, which is a certain particular path of meditation. There's lots of aspects to this. By the end of the class, we'll give you some basic meditation instruction. You know, I'm going to need a whiteboard, but we don't have to. No, you don't have to rush. Don't you go because others have to go. Can you, Brian? Can you go and get it? Is that okay? But I won't need it immediately. I thought, though, before we do anything else, we should start with some music. So why don't we just do that, and then we'll go on from there.
This is a song about a man in India who had a very special way of expressing devotion to the Lord. Special sadhana, it's called a spiritual practice. And he would just look around at all the beautiful nature around him like this and say to God, "Well done." So that's what this is about. In India there lived by the banks of a stream a hermit whose prayers chose applause for their theme. He gazed at the flowers and he smiled at the sun. Then he clapped with delight. "Lord," he cried, "oh, well done. Well done, Lord, oh, very well done. The mountains that laugh with the gyps." You know what?
You're singing the tenor. You're not singing the melody.
We have a 4-part choir, and it's one of those songs I'm so used to singing my part. It's like, okay, what's the melody? All right, so I have to clone.
They don't know. They didn't know, but we knew. No. Yeah.
Well done, Lord, oh, very well done. The mountains that laugh with the gypsy clouds, the fields smile to welcome the sun. All nature sings praises aloud. The fields smile to welcome the sun. All nature sings praises aloud. The trees dance to show their elation. A day on God's earth has begun. And every true heart in creation in speechless wonder is bowed. And every true heart in creation in speechless wonder is bowed. Well done, Lord, oh, very well done. The joy that you planted in children's hearts, the thrill known in bearing a son, the hope when a trial departs. The thrill known in bearing a son, the hope when a trial departs. The gladness of men in their neighbors, of youth in its victories won. Our joys are the proof of your labors. How wonderful, Lord, are your arts. Our joys are the proof of your labors. How wonderful, Lord, are your arts. Well done, Lord, oh, very well done. At last I've discovered the mystic key. The world's joy, oh, secretive one, replies to your sweetness in me. The world's joy, oh, secretive one, replies to your sweetness in me. For here in my heart lies the answer, your love shedding light like the sun. All life seems to leap like a dancer, when gazing I see only thee. All life seems to leap like a dancer, when gazing I see only thee. Life is a dream, time like a stream carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, Soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Thank you. Very, very nice.
Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near. Home's the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today. Home's a heart that is whole. Often I dream that life is a play, laughter forever and skies never gray. But when I'm silent, freed from all care, I discover my home's everywhere. Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near. Home's the end of the fray.
So, what we're offering this afternoon is twofold. One is some of the beginning instruction for those of you who would just like some fundamental meditation. Even if you already have some practice that you're doing, I'm hoping that what we offer will be central enough that it will enhance the practice that you're following. I'm going to put it right there so I don't have to. Yeah, it's really heavy. It's not a girl kind of project. Okay, there we go. Yeah. I mean, this is like, I don't know what they expect to have to, this thing has to withstand. We'll give you some basic instruction about what meditation is and why, that I hope even if you have your own practice already, it will help you in it. If you're beginning at meditation, then we'll also set your feet on the path. Almost all of you, or all of you, know Kavita, who runs many classes in this area already and will be running a lot more. So I don't feel the necessity to provide everything, because we're just introducing and then you'll be able to follow up with her and many other things. I think this is the beginning of an ever-expanding possibility. So I also really want to, this is my opportunity to really talk about even more who we are and why we're here from a spiritual point of view. For those of you who weren't here this morning but were here yesterday, you see that our pictures have multiplied in the night. That until now we've had Yogananda's picture here and Kriyananda, and my reasoning for doing that is I explained it to people, and this is all part of what it is that I don't ever like if I can avoid it, to stand up here as if I were the source of what I'm saying. I know there are many people who teach, and they just offer what they know, and maybe they've studied with many people or however they define themselves, but they present their own reality. Discipleship is not integral to whatever they're presenting. I have a very different attitude toward myself and what I'm doing, and I claim an independent understanding and a deep personal ownership of that I say. But I don't presume to have created it. And I don't presume even that the capacity to share it with you is my own. It's that I'm an instrument. And this is the entire path and concept of discipleship. And discipleship is more or less popular in our particular age. I live in America where independence is highly prized, and nobody's going to tell me what to do is highly prized, combined with a society that actually is rather cooperative, basically based on the pioneer effort. Kind of working together is part of what we do. When we travel to India and try to establish communities, we as Americans really realize how cooperative we are by nature, and that culturally not all cultures are. I'm learning this one, so we'll see which way it goes. But in any case, discipleship is a particular attitude toward life. Having a guru or a teacher is actually secondary to the attitude of being a disciple. Yogananda's seminal book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which many of you have read or have seen me hold up by now. This is the blue original version. There is an orange version of it, which is highly edited. Yesterday I suggested to people that if you have the orange book, you shred it. I was talking about freedom from karma, and I created a little, but it's worth it. So, in any case, this is the original book. It's unedited, and it's better. It's more authentic. The first sentence of this book says that the characteristic feature of Indian culture, he's representing his tradition, is a search for eternal verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship, which is to say, once you start looking for eternal truth, you realize the necessity to have someone help you. And it's just that's how it works. Yes, that can sound dogmatic. And as Swamiji puts it, when some man came up to him and said, "Do I need a guru?" And he says, "No, of course not if you don't think you need a guru." Meaning, no guru is going to force himself upon you. If you don't want to be a student, then of course you don't need a teacher. And no true teacher would try to batter down your resistance. And that's why Yogananda wrote that sentence the way he wrote it. We have a little game we sometimes play in our community. It's called Autobiography of a Yogi Trivia. And because so many people have read this book so many times, people will ask obscure questions. What was the name of the sister of Yogananda's? What was Yogananda's mother's name? You know, who was the uncle that did this? I mean, just way, what was the name of the horse? It just goes way like this. But one of them actually is, what's the first sentence of Autobiography of a Yogi, which when you think of it is a throwaway. But almost everyone says the guru-disciple relationship. Because we tend to think that the gurus come first, whereas in fact it's entirely the disciple-guru relationship. There's a tradition that says don't even think about going out to look for a guru, don't bother. When you're ready, he'll come to you. There was an interesting moment in Swami Kriyananda's life. He was giving a talk at a bookstore in Los Angeles called the Bodhi Tree, and it was a universal truth bookstore. And so they had pictures of many, many, many modern and ancient sages on the walls. And Swamiji was a very full room, and there was not enough seats, and people were sitting on the floor. And a young man had come there. This was some 20 years ago. And he was very attracted to Satya Sai Baba, who had the ashram in India. And he was wanting to go see Sai Baba, and he was afraid, and he was wanting and afraid, and it was very much of a conflict. And he was coming to hear Swami Kriyananda speak, just looking for clarity. So he sits down against the wall because there was no other place to sit. And Swamiji, because he spoke intuitively to what was happening in the room, it wasn't like he calculated, it's just thoughts would come to him. But he said with great force, "Don't think you have to go looking for the Guru. When you are ready, the Guru will come to you." At which point the picture on the wall came off the wall, flipped over, landed in this boy's lap face up, Sai Baba's face. Without knowing it, he had sat directly under his picture, and in that moment it flipped over and landed on his lap. And then he, as he said, told us that he just held it to his heart the whole rest of the night. Presumably bought his ticket to India. I didn't hear the rest of the story. But we're not dealing with ordinary forces here. We're dealing with powers that transcend time and space. And Autobiography of a Yogi, which has been the way we sometimes write it. I mean, Autobiography of a Yogi helped launch the whole spiritual new thought outside of traditional ways of thinking. It really has been the book that has helped launch that. It's on the bestseller list. It remains on the bestseller list of various countries and cities. I mean, decades. No book lasts like that. Because it's not just words on a page, it's the transmission vehicle for an elevated consciousness that is calling. It's the heart's own call. And this book is all about guru and disciple. Yogananda himself, because there's the Sanskrit word lila, which simply means divine play. We don't have an equivalent concept in English because English-speaking people don't think about the divine play. So we didn't come up with a word. But lila means the way that God moves through the world, the way that the divine moves through the world. And the word play has many connotations to it. It's often whimsical, it's often different. And when an enlightened master takes a physical body, his consciousness is not diminished by inhabiting a physical body, but he plays the role. It's very much like a very good actor who has to play a certain part. Will put on the costume and the makeup and just the way you're supposed to be. And when you step out on stage, you are that character. There's an Indian actor named Victor Banerjee who's quite well known in India. And there's actually another movie coming out, which is a movie basically of Swami's autobiography, The Path. The book is called The Answer, and it's about Kriyananda's own search for truth and then his meeting of Yogananda. Victor Banerjee plays Yogananda in that movie. That movie is it's coming out next spring. It's actually, I haven't seen it, only a couple of us have seen it because it's being made outside of our community by people who Swamiji asked to make the movie, but we haven't participated in it like we did the movie last night. That's half true, but not as much. And when I was talking to Victor, I met him in Calcutta when he met Swami and accepted the part. And I asked him, sort of like, I said, this is a living character. This person really lived. You can watch films, you can hear his voice. I said, how do you do this? How much will you study? His answer was fascinating to me. He said, I study for a while until the character starts living inside of me. And Swami Kriyananda said to him, Victor, when you do the filming, I'd like to be there because I knew Yogananda and I know what would be authentic for what you have to do. As it happened, Swami died before the filming started. And I would like to help you. And Victor, really without pride, just said simply, oh, that won't be necessary. He said, once the character lives inside of me, everything I do is correct. And he just was very confident. He's in his late 60s. He's had a lifetime of this. Well, I thought of him when you try to explain what it is, when a free soul incarnates. Many of you were in the class about karma yesterday, and we were talking about all these vrittis and the chakras of compelling desires and unlearned lessons that force us here. Our soul forces us here so we can finish the job. A self-realized master has finished. He understands that there is only one reality, and that reality is infinite. His identification has shifted from the individual to the infinite. In some cases she, although Swami was once asked, why are there only men on our altar? Why is it that all the avatars, which are self-realized masters, are men? Why aren't they women? Swamiji said it's a masculine job. That was his answer. That the nature of being an avatar is that it's a moving out and making something happen. Masculine and feminine pre-exist men and women. Men and women are a manifestation of a principle. So he says it's a masculine job. And the Anandamoyi Ma, who was a great saint in India, who died in 1982, she was a free soul, if not an avatar. There's shades of distinction here. But she did nothing. She just sat there. And then she would go someplace else and sit there. She danced, she sang, she spoke, but she created no organization, she did no work, she had no mission. She had an extremely feminine, in the most abstract concept. She was a mother. She just radiated divine love and changed the life of hundreds of thousands of people. But she did it in that way. She never founded an organization, built a temple or anything. She wasn't masculine in the way she lived. Although Swamiji said she was a perfect balance. He knew her, I never met her. And her teaching was very masculine. It was very strong and abstract. And she was a very small woman, but she shook the floor when she walked, he said. She had all the will. She was a perfect balance. But she was in a female body. So when the avatar takes a body, which seems throughout history has always been male, maybe there'll be an exception, he genuinely takes on the role of being a human being. Because if he didn't, it would just be a sham. What could we learn from that? What could we learn from someone who never suffers, never struggles, never meets an obstacle, never has to show courage, never is betrayed, just sails through and lives a life that bears no relationship to ours? Where is the teaching in that? When Swami Kriyananda actually asked Yogananda, what do you feel? He said, well, in your heart, you're always free. I'm not at that level myself. I don't understand exactly. But they come in just to help us. They're called in. And once they're in the incarnation they choose, they're limited by the capacity of the culture into which they have incarnated. And they're limited by the needs of the disciples that they've come to help. Which is to say, they can't give more to the culture or to the people than the people themselves can receive. It's not that their capacity is limited, but the capacity to receive is there. And they can't make something happen that the culture won't accept. Jesus Christ is the most extraordinary example. He was actually an avatar for the Jewish people. He came to renew and resurrect, really literally, the ancient Jewish traditions because it had fallen into the hands of a corrupt priesthood. And there was a deeply sincere element within the Jewish world at that time, which many people believe to be the Essene community, which was a subgroup of the Jewish community. But the Jewish community was defined by the priesthood, and the priesthood, as often happens, has become egocentric and power-oriented, and it had become about power and money. But Judaism is a true faith, and there were sincere souls in there. Those of you who heard the Festival of Light this morning, a prayer, this is the verse, the line that's in there. The Festival of Light is this ritual that we do every week in Ananda that explains the whole path. And this is a paragraph. A prayer of love went up from earth and you responded. A ray of your light burst out from the heart of infinity, came downward through night skies of consciousness and was born on earth for the redemption of mankind in human form. That's a description of how an avatar comes again and again and again. Christianity has just Jesus. He appeared fundamentally out of nowhere. There'd never been anyone like him. There never will be anything like him again. Which leaves all of us kind of wandering about. Either we surrender completely and let him save us, or we're not saved. In the Indian tradition, because the tradition is a long, unbroken tradition, they realize that these great masters appear periodically. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. And that's where the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita need to be brought together. Because everything Jesus taught is exactly what the Bhagavad Gita teaches. But everything that the Christian church teaches is not exactly what the Bhagavad Gita taught. But the Gita knows that these souls appear periodically. And in the Gita, it's put this way: whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I, Krishna speaking as the infinite, I, the infinite spirit, take visible form to restore dharma, to restore righteousness. And so Krishna himself, Rama, Buddha, Chaitanya, Ramanuja, there's lots of others, Sri Ramakrishna, Paramhansa Yogananda, Jesus Christ, lots of them. They're all of the same ilk spiritually. They're all free souls with a particular compassionate mission. How this works is self-evidently beyond me. But that it does work, I have come deeply to believe, and that all scriptures, true scriptures, are talking about this. When you start looking at the Bible, oh, thank you, there you have it. When you start looking at the Bible, understanding that Jesus was one of these free souls, the whole misunderstanding of the Bible is about the pronoun I. But in the Gita, when Krishna says I, he means I, the infinite spirit, not I, the body that looks like Krishna. In the West, well, Jesus was born into a culture that was pretty unaware, and he could not speak very directly about anything. And everything had to be symbolic in his public discourses. One presumes in private he was able to be more direct. But the culture that he was in, God was a fierce and unrelenting judge. And the priests were the ones who were the attorneys who told you whether you had done it right or wrong. And if you didn't meet all the rules, then the judge would just cast you out. It was a very harsh and unpleasant situation. So Jesus was going to progress it a little, but he could progress it only to God as your Father. And then he tried to explain the Son can inherit the full riches of the Father. So he becomes the Son of God. It's a beautiful symbol if you understand it properly. And then he called himself the only Son of God, which meant the realized soul is the true expression of the infinite beyond. But who am I? What is the pronoun I? In the life of Jesus, it became that physical body. And of course, it's really hard to make the whole thing work if you've just got one physical body that just is born and dies. So you have to create a lot of mythology around that, essentially. But when you take it from the Gita, well, of course, Son means the perfect reflection of. And these masters are the perfect reflection of the infinite spirit. And some of the people that Jesus came to serve understood, and some of them, as we well know by his spectacular demise, did not understand it at all. In fact, turned on him in the most terrible way. But that was all part of the Leela. Right. So what Yogananda talks about in this book is he plays the part of a seeker. He plays the part of one seeking truth, and how is he going to find truth? And then he demonstrates to us how we ought to live. Because if a great master just appears and is self-realized and does miracles and never trains himself, then everybody who follows him gets to say, oh, on your path you have to do austerities and meditate, but on our path we just sit there and are realized. You see? Our guru never did anything. He just sat there and was God realized, and that's all we do. We just sit around, and there are, God bless them, spiritual paths that are just like that these days. We don't ever have to do anything. We just call ourselves enlightened. I actually heard a teacher say, I used to meditate, but now, this is what he actually said, but now I'm just enlightened. All right, if that works for you. But what Yogananda set up as an example was that we have to seek, and that we have to exercise willpower, we have to practice in the right way, We have to be disciples. We have to find a way to learn, and then we have to be loyal to that path. And he did it as an example. There was no necessity for his own consciousness, but he took on the role of being a human being. And then he wanted to show us how to actually carry that out in a practical manner, which is actually exactly what Jesus did. But the problem with the life of Jesus is that there are 18 years of his life that are not reported in the Bible. And they're lovingly called the lost years or the missing years. But there is well-verified historical fact that about 500 years after Jesus died, that all of that was taken out. And it was, as Swamiji once put it, he said, people had the nerve to pull it out, but nobody had the nerve to create a new biography. Even common sense tells you, this man lived 33 years. How is it possible that nobody knew anything about 18 years of his life? You think in all that time nobody asked him, hey, Master, where were you? You know, of course it would be talked about. Now, Yogananda just asserts, and there is again evidence in all sorts of places, old manuscripts, traditions in India, that during those years he was in India. That Yogananda says the 3 wise men who came to visit him were 3 of these gurus, Babaji, Sri Yukteswar, and Lahiri, and that there is an intimate link spiritually among these masters. And when Jesus was of an age, which was really just after the age of 12, when he started his mission, he went with his family to Jerusalem. They left Jerusalem and they thought he was with them, and he wasn't. He stayed back in the temple. His parents, after 3 days, realized he wasn't part of the caravan. They panicked and ran back to find him. They find him. He's sitting in the temple teaching. He's perfectly comfortable. He's just fine. His mother and father are quite upset. Well, you know, why did you do this? And he looks at them and he's quite bewildered. And he says, don't you know I must be about my Father's business? This is what I was born to do. I wasn't born to just be your son. I wasn't born to become a carpenter in Joseph's shop. And shortly after that, the narrative ceases until he's 30 years old. And what Yogananda writes is that he went to India and studied Sanatana Dharma and did sadhana. And that's the most important point. He did spiritual practice. He went, studied, learned from the masters, practiced himself, prepared himself, and then came back and did what the part of his life we know. But because there's no place, and the tradition of why it was taken out was that this is what happens to the revelation of true masters, is that people of lesser minds start adjusting it so it works better for them. And they started arguing, the church authorities, that it would diminish people's faith in Jesus if they thought that he had to go somewhere and learn anything. The counter-argument was, well, the disciples all knew about it and it didn't bother them, but that argument didn't carry the day, so those years were simply lifted out. Okay. Now, this is important because with Jesus on the altar, we need to understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the individual journey of self-realization. Yesterday, we talked about karma and reincarnation, it taking many lives. We have to follow through many different stages. And the masters tell us in words and in teaching, and it's in the Bible. There's a few places where reincarnation also, which was removed from the Bible also, because the church felt that if people thought they had all the time in the world, they wouldn't try as hard, and it also diminished the authority and control the church had over people. If it has to be done right now and has to be done in this way, then you've got to listen to what they say. If it can be over many incarnations. This is just the way of the world, which is why the avatars come back. Because it lasts for a while and then people lower it down to something they can handle, and then it has to be renewed again. But that doesn't have anything to do with the revelation of the Master. So in Autobiography of a Yogi, we understand, he presents this picture of what it is to have this passionate desire for divine understanding and how we go about getting it. And the search for eternal verities leads to the concomitant understanding of the disciple-guru relationship. So the masters that we have expressed here with Jesus as the lineage isn't continuous is Babaji, and I have a piece of paper that explains all this, and if you've read autobiography, you've heard. Babaji is a deathless master who lives in the Himalayas even now. This is not a photograph. This is a drawing done by Yogananda's brother at his instruction, because Yogananda knew what he looks like. And so Babaji is really the most interesting character in Autobiography of a Yogi. Often when people read the book, they forget Yogananda, but they remember Babaji, because he's remarkable. And he lives even now as a world-renouncing renunciate in the high Himalayas. How? Why? He's there, as Autobiography of a Yogi says, as a challenge to mankind in our sense of limitation. And Babaji's direct disciple is Lahiri Mahashaya. Lahiri is his, Babaji just means revered father. Baba is father, J.I. is respect and affection combined. We call Swami Kriyananda Swamiji. It's just an Indian tradition. This is an actual photograph of Lahiri. What you often see is a painting of him, which is more clear, but this is an actual photograph. He lived in the 1800s in Varanasi. Lahiri is his family name. Mahashaya means great soul. So he has the title, Lahiri the Great Soul. Sham Lahiri is his name. He was a householder, which is very unusual in a spiritual tradition. He was married, had 2 sons. He worked as a government accountant. And then simultaneously was a self-realized master, because one of the elements, and this is, introduction to Kriya and self-realization, this is all part of it, is that most of our spiritual history has been through the age called Kali Yuga, in which the material world was very dense and people's concept of the world was entirely material. If you think how the world has changed since 1900, when a planetary shift took place, with all of the inventions and energy and sources of energy and understanding of everything. Einstein's revelations came shortly after that. But in the very materialistic age, spirit and matter are not compatible. If you're interested in spiritual life, you must turn your back on the world. You go to the Himalayas, you go to the convent, you become an impoverished whatever, you become a desert hermit. But now we're moving into an age when the spiritual life and the material life can live harmoniously together. Which is why when I was explaining to all of you, I am actually a Swami, Nayaswami, because that's a different order that I'm part of. But my husband and I are still together, because that's not incompatible in this age, to have a partner and still be fully spiritual. So Lahiri set that in motion. He's the householder. And he showed us that you can be completely spiritual and just live an ordinary life. And that's a very helpful image for us. He was the guru of Sri Yukteswar. Yukteswar is a spiritual name, the light of God, I believe. Have I got that right? Something like that. Sri is like revered. So Sri Yukteswar, he also was a householder. He was married and had a daughter. His wife died, his daughter was married, and then he became a Swami at that point. And Sri Yukteswar was the guru of Yogananda. And if you read an autobiography of a yogi, you read all about Yogananda finding Sri Yukteswar and all about his teachings. All of these masters are described. Now, what does that have to do with us? Okay. Lineage matters. And this is something that people don't always understand. Because when we start on a spiritual path, we're not only working with methods and techniques, but we're also putting ourselves in attunement with a whole ray of power, divine power. And also, spiritual lineage, I don't know exactly how to say it, it gives the flavor of what you're doing. There's many different styles about how you can be spiritual. Some spiritual paths are very austere and very black and white and very quiet, and there's not much music, and everything is world-renouncing, and others are just all about dancing and singing and waving your arms. And I stayed in the Hare Krishna temple in Mumbai, which is they run like a hotel there, and you go down in the morning and everybody's in the temple and they're dancing. I just loved it. But it's not my path, And the Ananda path is what you're seeing. And even within this lineage, there's 2 major branches of Yogananda's family already, the Orange Book and the Blue Book. And even among, those are just the major ones. But it divides in many different directions because look around the room, we're all so different, aren't we? You know, and you don't even speak English the way we speak English. This English to English translation is required sometimes. You know, we're all so different. So there have to be a lot of different vibrations for everybody to feel at home. But that's just the path to the same top of the mountain. And when we're at the top of the mountain, we're all in the same place. But we all have to go up the way that works for us. So when Yogananda came to America, which over this weekend I mentioned, you know, that this path of self-realization, as he called it, he launched it from America. Because America is a place where a lot of new innovative things on our planet are happening. Because it's such a new country, these things can happen. It's a democracy, it has no tradition. It's just a wide open plain virtually on which these things can be laid. Yogananda himself said, in India, where they understand the process of realizing God and becoming spiritually free, and they realize it takes many incarnations, and so their attitude toward it is that it's possible, but they have a great sense of, well, you know, eventually, but my karma, it's just too much, I can't do it. He says Americans are so uninformed. He would just say, well, you know, you can realize God, and they would say, yes, we can do it, like this. And sometimes they could, because it didn't cross their mind that it wasn't possible. And in essence, that's really the message that Yogananda came to express. I mean, it's epitomized by that American attitude, the ancient wisdom of India with the amazing yes, we can do it attitude of America is really the essence of the path of self-realization. It's not really about nationalities. Those are just the vibrations that represent it. But it represents it very well because Yogananda also came to correct, just as Jesus came to correct, a lot of misunderstandings. One of the misunderstandings was to restore the actual teachings of Jesus. At one point before we had now we have a beautiful temple of our own in Palo Alto where I live. Actually, it used to be a Catholic church. Somehow that pleases me. It used to be a Catholic church. The Catholics don't tell you why, but they're having a crisis of vocations. They don't have enough priests. So they can't run all their churches. And why they decided to sell it was, I really think that Yogananda put it into the mind of whoever's in charge of their property. They sold it to us. So we have this beautiful building, beautiful facility. But before we did, when we wanted to have a more expansive program, we just had this little storefront church, essentially. We'd have to rent somebody else's building. So one year we rented this beautiful Congregational or Methodist church. It was very nice in the area, and we had our program there, and it was a great success. The next year I went back to rent it again, but somehow or another, I guess the minister in charge had gotten a lot of complaints. So he, instead of just renting it to us easily, he called me in for an interview. And he wanted to know more about what this was all about. And I told him that, you know, we teach from the Bible, and that I told him about Yogananda, and he came to teach. I didn't say restore the teachings of Jesus. I'm not that stupid. But I did say that he taught from both the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. And this minister, who was not, I think, the best representative of his faith, pulled himself up like that, and he said, well, he doesn't presume to call himself a Christian, does he? Just like that. Oh, brother. I said, no, he traces his lineage directly back to Jesus. Just like that. And of course, he never let us use his church again. You know, it was just like that. But so Yogananda came to correct. And one thing he came to correct is gross misunderstandings about what Jesus actually meant. And in the West, that's very important. But in the East also, it's important because a lot of the East is very prejudiced against Jesus with good cause because of all those missionaries who came over there and told them that they didn't know anything about religion. I mean, they naturally have a strong resentment that needs to be overcome. And in the West, we need to have a much greater understanding of the path that we're actually following for those who are actually following it. So that was the correction he came to restore again. In the Festival of Light you heard this morning, the noble taper of inner communion burns low in the temple, the temples devoted to Jesus. On the lower altar of good works, they're going strong. But inner communion with God, it's just not there. And it needs to be brought back, because that's what Jesus taught. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Where do you think the kingdom of God is? Within. That's where you find it. Lo here and lo there, you're looking. The kingdom of God is within. He was teaching exactly the same in many, many ways. So, and then the other thing that Yogananda came to teach is that he was able, Jesus was able to take the teaching of the time from the harsh judge to the father. Yogananda came to take it from the father to the mother. And that is not because that's not the goddess principle that I know many women are asserting. That is not a false teaching, but that's not really what Yogananda was wanting to say. The principle of mother and father are divine principles that we as men and women express. The father is the wisdom aspect of the divine that holds us to a certain standard. That's, if you think of a human family, that's what the father does. Just wait till your father gets home and he'll talk to you about it, right? And the mother aspect is compassion and unconditional love. And both are needed, because mere compassion without the demand that we have courage to face what we have to face is not enough. But merely the demand that we face what we have to face without the unconditional love and compassion that gives us the capacity to do it, you see. And so now we're progressing. It is the age of the feminine. It is what's coming forward. But that's compassion is what we're looking for. Jesus actually taught it, because you see, just before he died, he said, after I am gone, I will send you, what was the word he used? The Comforter. And the Holy Spirit, that's the feminine in Christianity, although it's not seen. They brought in the Virgin Mary because that worked better. But he said, I will send you the Comforter, and the Comforter will teach you more than I was able to teach you. I have to digress with this wonderful joke. This is a true one. A little child came home from Sunday school and said, Mommy, don't worry anymore. God's going to send the quilt. And then the mother called the Sunday school teacher. And the Sunday school teacher said, I will send you the Comforter. So, but the Comforter is perfect. And what the implications of that are. This is how Yogananda put it. He said, the mother is closer than the father, he says. And he even says, pray to God as mother. He can't resist you when you do that. That's how he put it. And the mother is closer than the father. Because what he's also trying to correct, in India, it's all about the priests and the temples and the rituals and the mantras and you hire a priest to do the ritual, and then when you do the ritual, maybe God will be pleased and you'll get what you want. And one of my Hindu friends says, we're the only religion where we have to hire somebody to practice it for us. And that's what does that create? What that creates is distance. And that's based on the combination of the judge and the father. If the syllables aren't pronounced exactly right, then it won't work. I mean, that's a very scary place to be, isn't it? Where is the comfort in that? That's just the anxiousness that you do it exactly right. And then that's always at a distance. And in the Christian church, it's just like Jesus died in this most horrible manner to save us, and we've just got to be grateful for that. And if we're not, where is the comfort in that? I mean, there's a little comfort in it, unless you contemplate too much about the horrific nature of his death as it is portrayed. I was with Swamiji at the Uffizi in Florence, and we walked around and looked at, for a long time at beautiful religious art, which is just 100 different variations on Jesus being crucified. We came out and Swami sort of said, well, I think it's time for another theme. What do you say? I think we've taken that one as far as we can go. Now, it wasn't true. There's a lot that can be said, but I won't go there right now. The crucifixion of Jesus is a very true metaphysical thing, but not the way it's taught. Not now. Whereas, I'll quote the festival, whereas in the past, sorrow and suffering were the coin of man's redemption. For us now, that payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy. Sorrowing and suffering is not the path to God. Thus may we understand that pain is the fruit of self-love, whereas joy is the fruit of love for God. And when you think of God as the comforter, where does that bring you? That brings you right to joy. That's taking away the pain and suffering. So what Yogananda came to bring is an intimacy with God, which is represented by the mother. And he often talked about Divine Mother. And that was how he himself just thought about God. God was his Divine Mother. And what that means is that God is an intimate, compassionate, unconditionally loving comforter. Now that's something we can embrace, isn't it? But Heavenly Father's still there. There are these wonderful, Master has these wonderful sort of vignettes of, crawling on the lap of the Divine Mother. And these are using creative imagination to bring yourself into attunement with something that's actually there. Now, sometimes people take you through visualizations. You're walking across a green field and then a white unicorn comes and the white unicorn speaks to you and tells you, and it can help you because it can calm you down and put you in a place that's useful, but there is no green field and there is no white unicorn. However, when you try to think about the divine force as an unconditional, loving mother who is going to comfort you and heal your heart at all times, that's true. And yes, abstractly, it can be defined in other ways, but this will align you. And that's the purpose of all that you see. That's devotional. It's because it aligns you. And then when you're aligned, you're able to receive, and then you can rise beyond it. But if you repudiate it, you wander. Because then we're only in tune with our own ideas. Okay, that's a simplistic statement, but that's in essence the. So Yogananda came to bring this intimacy. But how do we achieve it? And that's where the Father comes in. That there are disciplines that we follow. There are methods, there are attitudes, there are techniques. There's sadhana, which means spiritual practice. We do something in order to find that. And where do we find that intimate connection? Well, almost by definition, it's already within us. You may have a mother with a physical body who was kind enough to take you in her arms, but nonetheless, where you feel it is in your own self, isn't it? I have a vivid memory of when I was 7. My parents sent me to sleepaway camp. I was a very mature child, and I was very happy, but I was the youngest child in the camp, and skinny and small besides, and so I was kind of the camp mascot. It was really fun. But I couldn't do everything, and they wove these little potholders out of stretchy bands, out of these little looms. Probably day camps everywhere in the world do that, stretchy bands, and you weave them together, and I could never make them. It was beyond me to do it. Parents' Day came, and everybody had these potholders hanging on their bunks. I didn't have any because I couldn't make them. So there was a girl who was above me, so I took a couple of hers. I just took them off of her bunk and hung them on mine. Whoa, like that. I mean, the child brain, like, she's not going to notice? I mean, like, what's going to happen here? So very quickly I was found out. And I don't know why, but it was just a huge emotional thing for me. And I remember, my parents did not tolerate lying, but somehow I think they understood what was going on with this one. And I kept saying to my mother through my tears, they fell. But what I remember most of all is the way my mother held me. It can literally bring tears to my eyes when I think about it. It was such a trauma for me, and for reasons I don't know. But she just put her arms around me, and I thought they would scold me for lying, but they didn't. She just held me and let me say, they fell. But all of us have a moment, whether we were fortunate enough to have a mother who would do that, or had a mother that was not a good one, and we had to throw ourselves into Mother Nature or wherever it is. But we all know what that feels like. That's the motivation. And we want to get back to that. But then the Father comes in and he says, well, I'm afraid this is how you have to get back to it. So Master came and he brought what he called Kriya Yoga. Kriya means action. And all of this was very deliberate on Yogananda's part. Self-realization is a generic term. Ananda actually had no less than 12 years of litigation over the word self-realization, because it's a generic term. Nobody can own it. And Yogananda knew perfectly well what he was doing. He did not want this to be Yoganandaism, Yogananda-ianity, or whatever it would be. He wanted, and the word Christ, in fact, is the title, not the name. But he wanted it to be a universal reality that everyone could have, and the principle is very simple. Your spiritual life is in your hands. No priest, no dogma, no church, no organization, no community, no Ananda, no nothing. Nobody can do it for you. It's entirely in your hands. It's the most intimate relationship you will ever have. Kriya means action. And Kriya is a particular way of living that opens you to that intimate connection. Now, the search for eternal verities tends to lead you to the understanding that I need a teacher to help me do it, because we don't know. But all that teacher can do is strengthen our own efforts and commitment and guide them. There's nothing the teacher can do for you if you're not going to do it for yourself. So Kriya itself is a specific meditation technique which is given by initiation, which requires a certain amount of preparation. There are those who will initiate anybody who comes in the door into Kriya, but that's not our style. Because if you don't really know what you're doing, you won't get any benefit from it. And if you won't get any benefit, you won't practice it. So we're not doing anybody a favor by offering you something that will in the end be useless to you. Even worse, because you'll think you have had it and you know it doesn't work. So I can't teach you Kriya per se here. It takes 9 months at the least, a year, year and a half, depends on your pacing, to learn and practice. It's a bit like higher mathematics. You have to start at the beginning and you get the other techniques. And you start in medical school, it takes you 4 years. You don't really start on patients the first week. It's a little dangerous. It builds until you become competent. So Kriya is a process. But there's essentially, I'll have to count, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there's four preliminary steps. 2 of them are available to everyone. And we'll take a break, have a little music, and then we'll just teach you the basic principles of the first steps of Kriya, which is really quite sufficient for you to develop quite a magnetic communion with God. And when you begin to get a little bit of what that means, then because of Kavita in this area, and probably because of the fact that we will also return, you will be able to progress from that. Okay? Let's take a short break, then we'll have a little music, and then we'll go forward. Now I really want to talk about what is meditation and give you, by the time we're done, a simple technique to practice. Even though meditation is inherent and natural to the way we are made, and meditation is merely to cooperate with the way we are made, it is not our habit. I was with a friend of mine when their daughter was born, and the baby, they were in a hospital, and the baby was slightly distressed in her lungs. It turned out to be really nothing, but being in a hospital, there's an excess of concern, and they immediately whisked the baby away to make sure that she was okay. And the father went with the child, and I went with the father. And so this baby is probably 1.5 minutes old at this point. And she's lying on the whatever there. And because it was pretty obvious pretty quickly there was nothing wrong with her, she was just there with her daddy. And her daddy is, just to make the picture even more poignant, he's a big man with really big hands. And he's reaching down like this, and this little tiny child's hand just grabs one of her daddy's big fingers. Oh, I mean, talk about melting you into pieces. Watching this newborn child looking at her father grabbing his finger, it was, a moment in a million. And so first I did that. Then the philosopher and the spiritual person in me immediately thought, 1.5 minutes old, and look, she's already reaching outside herself to see what she can grab. And that's the way we're made, isn't it? All of our senses point outward. And our experience seems to come from outside ourselves, doesn't it? And that's just what little children do. Of course, that's their job. They're trying to figure out, where am I and how does it work here? You know, what planet am I on? What is this body? What's going on? Can I eat it? Can I eat it? Can I eat it? You know, just whatever it might be. It's just, but it's all about what can I reach out and bring in. And none of our education, essentially, unless you happen to grow up within a completely different world, really teaches us that no, it's not really what we can reach out and bring in, it's what we can cultivate within ourselves, how we can unite, how we can expand, how we can be content within ourselves. And by that I don't mean passive. One of the things that the lives of these great souls show us, I mean, Kriyananda was the most active and creative person I've ever known. I mean, he went through so many, he used his body to work out a lot of other people's karma. He ended up having both hips replaced, he had open heart surgery, he had countless physical things. Never, as far as I know, did he allow a single day to go by when he didn't do something creative or serviceful. The day he goes in for open heart surgery, he's editing the last of a book that needs to be done. As soon as he comes out of the anesthesia, he finishes the editing. And so it was just like nothing ever stopped him. So to think of our lives being directed from the inside, unless you happen to have the karma to be a Himalayan yogi and you just get to sit in a cave, and even then you end up like being like Babaji, who has to take care of the whole planet. It's not passive. It's just, where does it come from? Does it come from an inner awareness of our connection with a greater reality, pulling that greater reality through as an expression of what we're here to do? Or is it always reaching and grabbing and reaching and grabbing and trying to fill ourselves up? Fill ourselves up with food or stimulation or sexuality or power or drink or whatever it is. And this is God's little trick. And we can be quite annoyed with it, but it doesn't really have an effect on the trick, does it? We can be really mad that it ought to be different, it ought to be easier, why did he make it this way? All of that stuff. And we can spend a long time doing that. In fact, now that I'm talking about Ask Asha, that's one of the questions in the book. Why is there suffering? And part of the answer is, we can't really answer that question from the level of consciousness that asks it. We have to elevate ourselves, but I say more than that. But the main point is, at a certain point we have to ask, what can we do about this? What can we do about this constant inclination to try to get satisfaction from the outside? Is there an alternative? And we have to go at first against the grain and start asking ourselves, you know, who am I on the inside? And this is where the saints and the masters are really helpful, because that's the journey they've taken, and they'll talk to us about it. And we begin to discover this inner flow of energy. And what meditation is about is just simply reversing our habit. And that's why it's hard. I mean, meditation is, your eyes are closed, your ears are stopped. I mean, literally, you can put earplugs in your ears and it's helpful. You're not tasting, you're not smelling unless you like the smell of incense. You're not moving, you're not talking. And eventually you're not making lists in your head of all the things you're going to do as soon as this darn meditation is over. You know, it's that we are finding out who we are if we're not always defining ourselves from the outside. And the first thing we find out is what our inherent inner quality is. And in another class, perhaps it was Friday, I was saying, I taught a basic meditation class, and everybody described to me what their inner world was about. And it was very dramatic, each one of them. One was about sadness, one was about anger, one was about fear. Oh, one I forgot to mention was one was about, the woman said, as soon as I sit to meditate, I become anxious that I'm not doing it right. I knew there was one more that I particularly loved. Just anxiety, performance anxiety, which of course blocks it also. So the first thing we discover is, who am I when I'm not distracted? And that's not necessarily really someone deeper than you are when you're distracted. It's the same essential vibration. It's just, who am I when I'm not distracted? I actually read, we actually published this recently, and this is from Science magazine. Science magazine. 60% of men chose to give themselves an electric shock rather than sit 15 minutes without any distractions. It's so preposterous, I feel like it's made up, except the person who wrote it is an honorable person. But to have to just be alone with who I am as I am on the level that I normally live without being able to always keep it going. Now bear in mind, I want to say it's not that you become passive, you become active in a different way. So meditation is not just sense deprivation, which I don't know, forgive me if I repeat myself, but when I was in Chicago and I was with a taxi driver, he asked me, what do I do? My short answer was, I teach meditation. He said, I tried it, it didn't work. I said, what? He said, he didn't say this. He said, I tried it, didn't work. That's what he actually said. Or I don't have the Chicago right, but whatever the Chicago is. I said, oh, what did you do? I went in my room, I shut the door, I sat there with my eyes closed. It was awful. Yeah, that sounds real bad. I agree with you. He just was exactly the same person, did nothing except cut off the distractions. This is not meditation, and if you've been trying that and it hasn't worked, it's all right, you haven't tried it yet, okay? Because what we have to work with is, if you just block the normal outward flow of energy, you'll just feel kind of jammed up and restless, which is, I guess, why those men were willing to give themselves an electric shock, rather than just have all that energy beat against the bars of the cage and have nowhere to go. So what we have to understand is we have to understand what to do with all the energy that would normally be utilized in reaching, touching, tasting, eating, seeing, hearing, talking, thinking, planning. You know, that's a lot of energy. Now imagine if all that energy is gathered, focused, and redirected. I mean, that's when you talk about a laser light. That's what a laser light is. Where a friend of mine, an astrologer, read his horoscope and said, you know, he said, your horoscope is so restricted. He said, most people couldn't live with the pressure. As it was described, dharma for that man, right action for that man was about 1 inch wide. And he just, if he veered off of it at all, it would be a disaster. And the astrologer said, all that pressure would just snap on most people. And then my friend just said, he said, no, I made it into a laser, which was exactly accurate. You know, just took all of that, but instead of letting the pressure bother him, he just focused it and just made power out of that. Now, if you think about all the energy we're doing all the time, and if we could think about a harmonious, not a disharmonious way, but a harmonious way to gather all that energy and then make it into a one-pointed concentration, but not outward, as we're usually doing, but inward, and then the word for it we have to say is upward. Upward in the sense of expansive. It is actually upward because of the way the chakras are arranged, and the upward flow of energy is the expansive flow of energy. The upward flow of energy is what widens our sense of self. The downward flow of energy is what contracts us and confines us to the body. And there is literally currents of energy that go up and down the spine, and those currents of energy are closely related to the breathing in and breathing out. The breath is the uniting factor between the dimension of ourselves that we are normally not conscious of and the dimension of ourselves that we are accustomed to being part of. Breath is a very interesting reality because it's between automatic and under our control. It's under our control in that we could all do different breathing exercises. We could do pranayams, as they're called. We could do even breathing in, even breathing out. We can strengthen the breath. We can slow it down, all these different things. But you can't commit suicide by holding your breath. Because if you try to end your life by stopping breathing, at a certain point, you will pass out. And your brain will be short-circuited, and then you'll breathe automatically. So it's partially under our control and partially not. Also, breath is actually the definition, really, of life itself, or the infallible sign of life. Well, the way the medical things work now, they can bring you back from all kinds of places, but it always has been. And when a baby is born, there is all that anxiety for that baby to take his or her first breath. When my friend's baby, there was a little gerbil in that first breath. And that's why they whisked her away. But until that baby breathes, no matter how perfect the baby looks, the life hasn't really started. And if you're actually charting the horoscope from the moment of birth, it's the breath. That's when the incarnation starts. And Yogananda says the baby simultaneously screams, usually, takes in that first breath and then exhales it as a wail. Medical science speculates that it's because it's painful after having been able to breathe in the womb. Spiritual science says it's because the soul realizes, oh my God, I've done it again. And it has a very strong opinion right at the beginning. What have I gotten myself into? That's what he says. That's why a baby does that. And all the time that we inhabit this body, the breath is going to go in and out. And then if you've ever been with anyone who has passed away, and I've been with a few people, not a lot, the breath, as long as the breath is there, that person is living. Those of you who saw the movie who, I talked about my friend Paula dying. At the very end of her life, in the last few minutes of it, she was breathing, she would breathe in, then she would breathe out, and then there would be longer and longer pauses, and we would all just be waiting to see if it was over. Then she'd take one more breath, and she just took a few more, and then she was gone. And there's another factor which is very interesting, which I've observed in my father and others who have passed away, that in the last hours, minutes, time of a person's life, at first the effort is to keep breathing in. And so the breath sounds like this. And then they let it out. And then again. And it's a little creepy unless you're used to it. If you know what's happening, it's just the body is not working right anymore and they're trying to breathe. And then there's this funny rhythm that I've seen now enough to realize it's the truth, that all of a sudden the effort is to exhale. And so they'll go like that, and then they go like that. They'll push the breath out. It flips. If you're ever on a death watch, keep very close track of that, because as soon as the effort is to exhale rather than to inhale, they're not going to last very much longer. Because now they're really trying to get out. Because the last thing that happens, this is the end of your incarnation, is that last breath. And then if you're sitting there, you wait, and then there is no inhalation, and then you know it's over, like that. But in between, we're always breathing. So this breath has this really, what can only be called a mystic connection to a greater reality. It's present when the soul is present, it's absent when the soul is absent. Now you throw in this marvelous thing that yogis can actually stop their breath and not die, because they can control life force without any physical intermediary. Yogananda, when he was speaking in America in the 1920s, 30s, and mostly the 1920s and 30s, he drew thousands of people to his talks. He was exotic as he could be. There'd never been anyone like him. Well, there is no one like him, but there'd never been anyone like him in America ever. But also he drew thousands of people because he did miracle healings on the stage. He did phenomenal things. He would invite doctors onto the stage, and he would have one doctor take a pulse in this hand, another doctor take a pulse in this hand, and they would be different. He would have a pulse on one side and not on the other. He would stop his heartbeat altogether, no pulse. He would stop his breath. I mean, his body was a plaything to him. He could just animate it directly without any physical intermediary. He did feats of strength. He lay on two chairs with just his head on one end and his heels on the other, and he had several people try to bounce on him, and he remained absolutely straight. I mean, that's why people came. And then there was an advertisement I saw, "Bring your sick loved ones to see Paramhansa Yogananda," and he would heal them. Many stories of him healing. It was just, he could move this world. He really controlled it. Now, the fact that breathlessness, to remain in your body without the necessity to breathe, it's described briefly in the chapter about Kriya Yoga, is where we're going, where we may be able to go. We realize that the breath is the thread. And there's a Greek myth of Theseus, who has to go into this terrible labyrinth and slay the demon in the center, and then he has to be able to get out again. And many others have gone in, but they can't get out. And Ariadne, the woman who loves him, has a spool of thread, and she ties that spool of thread onto him. And she holds it here, and he goes all the way in, and then he can follow it all the way out. Well, I think of that as what the breath is. The spool is held in a state of a much higher state of reality than the one we're conscious of. But we have pulled that life force down. I mean, because breath is your life force. It's what keeps you, makes you who we are. And we use it all the way here. And meditation is tracing it back to the source. And the marvelous thing about using the breath as the trail is that you always have it with you. And you don't have to pack it. You can bring it overseas, and it's not part of your weight allotment or anything like that. It's just you. It's always there. It's also a marvelous reality because it takes us internal, and it begins to make us conscious of who we are on a different level than just the same level of who I am when I'm distracted. It begins to pull that energy in to its source instead of to its symptoms, so to speak. So let me just think, I know what else I was going to say. Give me a moment. Oh, I know what it was. So then here's another aspect about meditation in general that I want to talk about. The first night I talked about the conscious level of awareness, which is what we are normally on. The subconscious level, which is, I didn't talk about sleep on Friday night, but sleep is what we normally think of when we think of subconscious, where all of our involvement in the world is cut off and we fall down into this state where we are just in our own reality. We're not connected to anything that's going on. Much can happen in the sleep state. We can have very dynamic experiences, but they're experiences that are entirely self-generated. Nobody else is in those experiences with you. You can sleep right next to someone in the bed, and they can be off in Egypt, and you can be coming up the Amazon on a river, and they can have you with them, and you can have them with them, but neither of you can share that reality, really. It's just cutting yourself off and sinking down. And the very nature of the subconscious state, now that we're talking in terms of sleep, is that it's a lower energy state than the conscious state. Isn't that so? And if you lie down to sleep and you've got too much energy, you can't go into subconsciousness. You just can't go there. And you worry about this and you think about that and you finally give up and you get up and do something, or you just spend the whole night staring at the ceiling. Okay? Now, on the other side of the conscious mind is the superconscious state. And this is, I was saying on Friday, is where our awareness expands out to the infinite. Now, what we're doing when we're meditating is we're trying to cut off all the senses, but we're trying to go up into the superconscious realm. And the superconscious realm is a realm of even higher energy than the conscious realm. Let's call it the laser-like realm. That all the energy we would use outwardly, as I was saying earlier, we use upwardly. But here's just an interesting picture, which is, so far it's just a Y lying on its side. When we're going to meditate, this is the conscious level right here. We roll our awareness back from the things that we normally do when we're conscious. And when we go to sleep, that's exactly what we do, isn't it? We close our eyes, we shut our ears, we stop eating, talking, everything. So we roll ourselves back and we come to this junction right here. Now, if we're going to sleep, we've rolled all this energy back and we drop our energy even more and we literally fall asleep. And it feels like that, doesn't it? You kind of just, if you can remember doing it, you just kind of roll down that hill. In meditation, when we've withdrawn all that energy, we take what we now have freed and we increase the energy even more, and then we start rising up into superconsciousness. Now, what happens to people sometimes when they're meditating in superconsciousness is they let the energy drop, and all of a sudden you realize that you are no longer meditating, you are sleeping. And it often happens quite suddenly. You didn't really realize how it happened. Everything was just going great, and then it wasn't. And this is the mudra that goes with it. And we all know it. Technique is the difference between falling into subconscious sleep and actually moving up into, because how do you gather all that energy? One of the simple techniques is a very simple one, which is the 3 states of consciousness are related to the eyes are also a great indicator of where your consciousness is. People who study criminals and people who lie and things like that will tell you that the eyes always betray. There's always a flicker of this or that. I'm going to give you a much broader point of view. As a public speaker, I have observed people sitting up falling asleep more than most people get to do. By the grace of God, except for afternoon classes between 3 and 4. Mostly people don't fall asleep when I'm talking, but sometimes people do. But for the best of intentions, they're out of energy. And so I know that when you fall asleep, your eyes drop. And if you have babies, you're watching your baby, and all of a sudden your baby's eyes just fall. And that's, consistent with this. You're going down. And when you're awake, you're more or less looking straight out. That's the characteristic. When we want to be inspired, we tend to raise our eyes. Isn't that so? You just tend to look up and try to figure something out. Now, we do that instinctively because right here at the point between the eyebrows is the chakra that we call the spiritual eye. Those of you who were here yesterday, we talked a lot more about it. And we're seeking inspiration because also when we lift our eyes, the position of superconsciousness is the eyes raised. That's why when you see paintings of saints, a lot of the times they're looking up like that. It's also because when your consciousness actually rises, it's being pulled toward the spiritual eye, and that automatically pulls your eyes up, even very, very far up. Now we can use these facts as part of the technique of meditation. Invariably, if you feel that you are losing energy in your meditation and you're drifting, if you look, you'll see that your eyes have fallen. And to a surprising extent, surprising because it's so simple, if you just raise your eyes, you'll find it's impossible to be subconscious with your eyes raised. It just can't be done. Now, of course, if you're tired, they'll just drop again, but you can at least change it in the moment. So the way we use that in meditation is in relation to the spiritual eye. The meditation that we teach is always, the concentration point is here. As I mentioned yesterday, some people meditate from the heart, some from the navel. In further iterations, if you progress through this, we begin to involve everything, but this is the fundamental. The spiritual eye is the point because, as I was saying yesterday, identification of the soul with the physical body starts at the medulla. And if you really think about it, we tend to be more in our eyes than we are in our knees or our ankles. It's because our consciousness is actually sitting here. And we're looking out from here through our eyes. Isn't that how it feels all the time? You're not actually in your eyes, are you? You don't feel like your consciousness is here. Your consciousness is somewhere behind your eyes, and it's literally right here. And we identify with this point in the movie. For those of you who saw it, Swami Kriyananda talks about how people who get proud get tension here. And that's where the idea that you're looking down your noses at people. I was with Swamiji at a Unity Church, which is a New Thought church in Houston, Texas. It was a big church, and the minister was quite effective, but he habitually went around like that. And it really was his personality. He was quite proud of himself as being the minister of this very successful church. I'm sure God inspired Swami to do this, but he was giving a talk there, and he just started talking about this characteristic, and this little twitter goes through the whole congregation. And this man obliviously just sat there like that. It was such a moment. I told Swamiji about it later. He swore he didn't do it on purpose. But I think God was trying to get that man just a little. And if you get headaches and get tired, you find that the tension is building here. Self-concern, worry, it builds at this point, doesn't it? And the universal gesture of humility in all cultures is to drop the head. And the reason to do that is because you release the tension in the ego. And you surrender yourself. You know, you can go all the way down, whatever you do, but it always starts with you release that forward. Now, this chakra, which is the spiritual eye, this is where all of the chakras come, and this is identification with the infinite spirit. And the whole spiritual path, as I said yesterday, is transferring our sense of self and our perspective on the world from identification with the ego and the limited self to identification with the infinite. The distance is this much. These are the opposite poles, is how it's described, of the same chakra. Do I take this chakra, do I take my self-awareness and attach it to my body and my limited self? Do I take my self-awareness and attach it to my spiritual self? So our meditation is to magnetize energy here. In terms of what I was saying yesterday about the karma, that's also the best way to burn up the karma and pull the rest of the chakras in line, but I'm not going to go into that in more detail. So we want to be concentrating here. But if you take your raised eyes and try to look here, it's, you know, this is not a relaxed position, nor an attractive one, although you're probably alone, but still, and it's very uncomfortable besides. So it's not like this is physical. We're just redirecting our consciousness. So what you really want to do is, this is level, and if you imagine, you know, that there's a mountain out in front of you, and in fact the sun is rising just on the other side of that mountain. And then what happens is you're gazing out, and that action itself is expansive, and you're gazing just very comfortably because there's something there that's attracting you. And so literally, here, you'll see, we have it on some picture, don't we? Didn't I see it on something? Well, this is so tiny, I can't really show it to you. Anyway, this little tiny thing here. The spiritual eye is a field of yellow, golden yellow. This is moving light. It's not like a picture. It's a field of moving light that's yellow. There's a deep indigo field in the center, and then there's a perfect white star if you see it exactly. Most people do not see it exactly until the mind is calmer, but there it is. In our temple, above the pictures of the Master, we have a huge picture of the spiritual eye. And the point of that, and I realized it when I saw this without it, is to understand where the energy of the Masters comes from. And then so that we can all understand that we're all going somewhere else. Picture that our spiritual eye is about 4 feet across. I wanted it to be about 10 feet across, but the architecture of the building didn't allow it. But that's the big reality, and everything else comes down from that. And that star in the center is the entryway to Christ consciousness. That's how we really become free. So we are looking up at the sun rising, the spiritual eye rising. Oftentimes you'll see that pattern without seeing it clearly. You'll sort of see light, you'll see dark, and you see light in the center. It usually, if you're not fully concentrated, it kind of moves around a little. But nonetheless, you gaze into it, and you're gazing here. You may see nothing at all. Everybody's different. Some people just shut their eyes and, whoa, there it is. And they never come back to class 2. I don't know why, but there it is. And total strangers, in Italy, just to tell you, we were building the temple there, and they were trying to build the spiritual eye, and they went to a glass maker, described what they wanted, just to an artisan in Rome. Oh, he says, I've been seeing that my whole life. I went to the Vatican, and there's this thing in the center of St. Peter's Cathedral. It's a huge, huge, gigantic thing where the Pope, I presume, stands and does things. It's beautiful. You stand in the center and you look up at this curved ceiling. It is the spiritual eye. It's a golden ring, a dark blue field, and white. And what they have a dove. 5 points. You see it in the Catholic churches, don't you? You have the 2 points of the tail, the arms, and the head. It's 5-pointed. Because someone saw it and put it up there because they knew it was the spiritual image. You see, this is an intimate reality that we're all living in. So when we meditate, we want to raise the eyes and gaze outward with the eyes closed. So why don't you can just experiment with that for a moment. Eyes are closed, and I love to think of myself standing on a cliff over an ocean and just looking out at the sun coming up at a distance. Or I was in Darjeeling once and I saw the sun come up over one of the high Himalayas. Just anything that has an expansive effect on your heart and on your mind, you see. You want to use your creative imagination to meet what's there. Okay. So we're looking. That's the first step. Now you can open your eyes and we'll come to this. The other part of it is the energy flows through the spine. And the physical body is not the astral body, but the physical body is an indication of our consciousness. So when we meditate, we need to meditate with a straight spine. And that we have to try not to be too tense. The way I like to think of it is as if there's a string from the heart that's being pulled up to that mountaintop. That's better than trying to straighten your back by raising your shoulders. You just straighten your back by opening your heart. That's why I'm saying you're looking at that mountain and you just feel it's pulling you. Now everybody says the most comfortable way to have a straight back is to lie down. But gee, that is an awful lot like going to sleep, isn't it? And unless you are injured and can't meditate sitting up, it's not such a good idea to meditate lying down, because the association between that and subconsciousness for almost everyone is irresistible. So we sit comfortably. These chairs are actually not bad for meditation. Preferably a little bit away from the back of the chair, but I have to confess to you that I tend to lean back against the chair, so I'm a terrible, bad example of that. Maybe it's because I'm a little short and the chairs are too wide. I don't know what it is. But just comfortably so that your feet are flat on the floor. And now you can also sit cross-legged on a cushion. And we have these little, Kavita can show you later, in subsequent times than this one, these little meditation benches that are also very good. Don't worry about, a chair is perfectly fine. As Yogananda said, you want to be concentrating on your meditation, not on your aching knees. You need to do something comfortable with your hands. There's various mudras, just closing the circuits like this. Some people like to put their hands out like this. Yogananda suggested putting your hands at the juncture of the abdomen, the trunk and the thighs, and that kind of pulls your shoulders back. Depending on how you're built, whatever's comfortable for you. It's better not to have your palms turned down on your legs, although people do that. It's not a receptive position. When you're trying to be receptive, you don't close like that. So palms up is better. Classic Buddhist poses, all of these work. Comfortable. So we have the spine comfortably straight. We're looking at the sun rising over the mountain. We're feeling our heart is also being drawn upward toward that, which automatically puts us the way we want to be. And now we need to start tracing the breath. And so the breath flows in, the breath flows out. We can start by doing you can start by doing some measured breathing, where you just really find the breath. Now, this exercise, this meditation practice that I'm describing, you are making no effort to control the breath, you are merely trying to observe it. So you really need to know where your breath is. Ideally, you feel the breath as it goes in and out through the nostrils, because that brings it up to the spiritual eye. You're closer to the spiritual eye. But if you can only be aware of your breath by literally putting your hands on your rib cage and feeling it move, you want to just really know where it is and actually be feeling it. So let's just spend a moment and just sort of notice that you're breathing in whatever way works for you. Inevitably, when you start observing, you also influence, so don't worry about it. Another way you can keep track of the breath, which also actually helps if you like, is the index finger of the right hand. You can fold it in as you exhale, and you can let it relax. Fold it in as you inhale, and let it relax as you exhale. Have I done that right? Yes. Inhale, exhale, that's optional. There's some kind of a connection there too, if it helps you keep track. Okay. Now, the problem is, we can do all of these things and the mind can just still go berserk on you, because nature abhors a vacuum. You cannot empty your mind. You have to, if you empty it, something else will come in, usually something you don't want. So we add to this practice a mantra. Mantra is a power sound. And the mantra that goes with this sounds like this: Hong, Sa. And Hong is the inhalation, Sa is the exhalation. And what that mantra means is, I am one with the infinite. If you want to use English instead of Sanskrit, it's preferable to get accustomed to the mantra because it's less mental. But that's what you're saying, and you want to bring an emotional feeling into it. I am one with the infinite. I am one with the infinite. Hong as you inhale, Sa as you exhale. And the mantra follows the breath. So if the breath is quicker, the mantra is faster. This is all mental as you're doing it. Hong as you inhale, Sa as you exhale, and just follow it. And you may find that the breath pauses, that there's a natural pause before the next inhalation. Is if you can just hold yourself in still silence, those pauses are very, very peaceful. So I think we'll just now practice a little bit. And I'm going to add to this just one more piece of it. Sometimes we need to relax the body, sometimes you want to exaggerate the tension in the body and then blow it all out. So 3 times what I want you to do is deliberately inhale, and as you inhale, tense your body as much as you can, just from your feet to the top of your head, and then deliberately exhale and let all that tension out. Let's do it one more time. Inhale, tense the body, and then exhale and throw that tension out. One more time. Inhale, and then exhale and throw that tension out. Now it's very good to begin your meditation with an invitation to the divine light to come and spend some time with you. So that prayer can be of any kind. You can pray to the Masters, you can pray to Divine Mother, you can pray to the impersonal Spirit, to the divine light. But we want to invoke that light. Divine light, be present within me, guide me, inspire me, lead me to a deeper understanding of myself and infinity. Now we'll practice for a few moments. Eyes upward and expansively outward. Breath flowing naturally. Hong as the breath flows in. Sa as the breath flows out, whatever rhythm. When your mind wanders, not if, but when your mind wanders, and you realize you have no idea where the breath or the mantra is, just simply exhale somewhat deliberately, and on the next inhalation begin again. This is why we call it practicing meditation. Doesn't matter how long or how much your mind wanders, just bring it back again. We'll meditate now for some few minutes together. At the end of your meditation, it's always helpful to send out either to souls that you know who need, specifically to those you know who may need the peace and blessing of inner awareness, or just to send out as a ray of loving hope out into the world to be received by all receptive hearts. We are far more powerful than we realize in terms of helping one another and helping the whole world together to expand hearts and minds and receive the light. So focusing at the spiritual eyes we've been doing, just project from your heart, raising up to the spiritual eye. Send rays of light out in blessing to all. Now let's add to that the magnetic power of our hands. Rub your hands together just slightly to generate energy. And palms outward, raise your arms. And let your voice be the instrument through the Om vibration of sending out uplifting energy to all receptive souls. Shanti, Shanti. The silent part of our meditation was about 10 minutes. With the music, it was about 15, just so you'll know. You can meditate like that. It's nice to meditate morning and night. It's very nice to meditate just before you go to sleep, because it elevates your subconscious experience into superconsciousness. It's nice to meditate as soon as you can when you first wake up in the morning, because before the world grabs you. If you're sound asleep when you first wake up in the morning, you may need to shower or exercise or do something so that you're alert enough. You can meditate in the middle of the day. You can meditate as many times as you like. You can do this Hong Sa breathing if you're sitting in a very boring meeting and you don't know what to do with yourself. You can start centering yourself in this way, and then when you begin to feel that peace, you can share it. You can do it on public transportation. It's not good to do it as a technique to fall asleep, though, because then when you try to meditate, you'll have trained yourself to fall asleep. You can do it, you see, very unobtrusively, because you're always carrying your breath around with you. So you can even do it with your eyes open. It's not good to do it when you're driving, though, because it distracts you from what you need to be outward at that point. There's much more that could be said. But okay, let me just finish the thought. Kavita gives regular classes and can help you. While we're here, Dambara and also I, to some extent, can also talk with you more. I could take a couple of questions if you have them, or we can answer your questions more privately. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Yes, Diana?
Strange question.
There's no such thing. I promise you, you're not the only one who had it.
Does it make a difference if you don't have a straight spine?
It's more dynamic. I mean, think about it. People who are habitually, this kind of a way of walking, you can sort of see that it doesn't create as much energy. Also, you're protecting your heart. Oh, you mean you don't have a physiologically straight? Yes. Oh, if you have scoliosis, yeah. That's just physical. Your astral spine is perfectly straight. So you just do what you can do. I mean, God is no tyrant. If your karma is to have scoliosis, I have a little in my own back. It's much more about your attitude and your energy. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's a good question. Helen.
I have been meditating for a few months and sometimes get glimpses of that third eye that you described, but I've never seen the white light or the white star. Does that just happen with time?
And people are different. I'll be actually very interested about New Zealanders, whom Swamiji said are much more psychically in tune. So we'll see if all of you see it much more easily than us practical Americans. But anyway, no, it doesn't make any difference. If it comes, it comes. It's a grace. Rejoice in it. If it never comes, you will still find that your meditation is changing your life. Too many people define meditation in terms of the phenomenon that they experience. But meditation is about the bliss, about the ever-expanding love and the calmness that it brings to you. Even people who meditate very badly still find that their lives are changed. Because if you're meditating at all and you have the karma to meditate badly, you're still going forward. You can't help where you're standing. And all of that it's a great mystery why these things happen. So the most important thing is to realize, this was my mantra. I am very sincere in my spiritual practices. This is what's happening to me. This must be what happens to sincere people who do spiritual practices. And I would just reason backwards, rather than thinking it had to be any way at all. Okay? So enjoy what comes and enjoy what doesn't come. And just wait and see. All right. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
On a film last night that there were children involved in the meditation practice. Could you speak briefly on mindfulness activity with children?
You have to teach children in their own terms, so and depends on the age of the children. From 0 to 6, they're working with their bodies. From 6 to 12, they're working with their feelings. From 12 to 18, they're working with their will. So it depends on which ones you're working with. The 0 to 6, we do quiet bodies. From 6 to 12, we do more about let's experience the peace, let's enter love. We think about it in terms of their feelings, praying for others, meditating for those reasons works better. And from 12 to 18, you're really trying to get people to use their will to have power in what they're doing. So that's part of the answer. You can't teach children as you teach adults, because children are not adults. But I'll tell you a wonderful story, but you can teach them a lot. In our school, as Erica was saying on the screen, you know, even little children, we teach them also to breathe. This is about breath. This is first Erica, who was on the program. Erica actually was presented as living at the village, but she actually lives in our community. That was the only slightly not true thing in the movie. She is a teacher of young children, but not at that location. But we teach the children to work with breath. And we had a child in our school. She teaches first grade. So this child came from another kindergarten. And we were teaching the children to breathe. And the child said, "At my other school, I didn't have to breathe, and you can't make me do it here." But more seriously, this woman and her son, who was about 6, and had been in our school since just over the age of 4, they were taking an airplane flight that became very, very turbulent. So turbulent that everybody was really a little frightened. Some of the children on the plane, the mother told us this later, some of the children on the plane were beginning to cry. And it was a very scary moment. Even the professionals were a little nervous. So the mother turned to her child and said, do what we call our schools living wisdom schools. Do what you learned at Living Wisdom to keep yourself calm. The little child sat like this, folded his little legs, put his hands out like that, began to breathe. He was perfectly calm through the whole experience. And the mother was totally freaked herself. And her child was just as relaxed as he could be. Afterwards, the stewardesses came over and said, "Who is that child?" "No, it's just what he learned in school." And then she came to meditation class afterwards. So, and another story Erica told was when a little child was wonked with a ball. I think a ball hits him in the head and he falls down. And this wasn't teacher guided. The little kids got around him. They put their hands on him to heal him, and then they guided him to breathe. Just breathe. They all breathed with him and breathed him in and out, and he calmed down. So you work with it, just in whatever way you can. Yeah, all right. That might be, oh yes, go ahead.
Like my meditation cycle is like this.
You mean
it has
your
more
regular?
like the curve. If I talk about the curve, sometimes I feel like I'm getting good. I'm getting images. That's good. But sometimes I feel, the same thing which you were talking about. So even after having deep breaths, I just give up sometimes. So I don't know. I should not pay, but sometimes I give up. So do you have anything to encourage me for this, or what should I do?
Don't quit. Don't quit. Whatever you do, don't quit. I'll tell you what you need is you need to keep adding energy to your meditation practice. That's what we're hoping will be the result of our visit here, is that those of you who have common values and common aspirations can become regular in your support of each other. Just to go once a week where you meditate with others, and the power of a group meditation gets you into it a little bit more. It gives you a little bit of oomph for the rest of your week. In our communities, we always gather on Sunday morning, and in the community that I live in, that Sunday morning holds everyone together We chant, we meditate, we have the blessing, we do the ritual. And even if you're a little bit weaker during the week, you come back and you keep, so you never fall too far. Community is everything. And, upward progress, you may be going upward, but that doesn't mean you're always walking upward. If you're climbing a mountain, you go up the first hill and then you have to go down to the next valley. Then you have to go up the next hill, then you have to go down to the next valley. So you can't, it's not something you can weigh and measure. I made progress today, I failed today. I made more progress today, I failed today. You have to be very masculine in this. I was talking about mother and father. The mother is what inspires you, but the father is what keeps you going. You're looking there, and you just keep your eye there, and it doesn't really matter what's happening along the way. I have good days, I have bad days. I quit for 3 days, I quit for a week, then I start again. Doesn't matter, you know where you're going. The only way you can fail is to give up. And even then, that doesn't matter. You'll just lie there for a while, and then you'll start again. It's just the way it is. You'll be driven. Yes, there's a million things I can say about keeping it going, but I'll have to let Kavita say them to you later, because I honor time. I think it's very important to honor time. And we're close to the end of it. What else can I say? Well, there's just many, many resources, and I encourage you to look for them. Don't think that you can just by yourself work it out. That's a mistake. You have to feed yourself, give yourself more energy, more inspiration, more opportunity. Oh, I do want to say this, definitely. We have just a few CDs back there. But, we ended with Dambara singing. And often, after you can bring in something recorded, you can sing yourself, you can listen to Swami Kriyananda's voice doing a mantra or a chant, and then you'll find yourself re-inspired, and then you can go back into the silence. And so sometimes that's a way to do it. Or you're getting weak in your meditation and you pray for other people, and that gives you a little more energy, and then you can continue. You have to be very creative. There's a lot of things I could say. This is just an introduction. Okay. Oh, and she's waving the card that describes the YouTube channel that I have, which is filled with inspiration. And you can go to ananda.org, and there's meditation classes online. This morning, Alan was meditating with the people in California. They actually do literally online meditation, which sounds just as goofy as you can imagine, but it actually works. You're sitting here, and people thousands of miles away are meditating, and you are meditating with them. And they have regular meditations online. And you all just sit there and do nothing together, but you're doing it because it's real time. Your consciousness is really united. It really works. When they first told me about that, I actually laughed. But I've tried it. It's real. And that alone is just fabulous. If you don't have anybody in your neighborhood, why don't you just go to another country and get them to meditate with you? I mean, sit here and go there. It's really quite astonishing. So if you're determined, there are enormous numbers of resources to help you. Okay? Well, I think that's the end of our story, which brings us to the end of our weekend. But we'll be in this area again, according to that piece of paper. And we are in and out of Hamilton continuously for the next 6 weeks. We're in New Zealand till November 4th. So if you would like to meet again in a less formal manner than this, please contact Kavita. And we're all connected, and we'll just be really happy to make time for you. We have quite a bit of unscheduled time, which we did on purpose, so that we could have informal opportunities and wouldn't just be completely booked all the time. So now, thank you. God bless you.